most high-profile legal cases the country has seen over the past half-century. The discussion with Professor Dershowitz will be moderated by the Sun's publisher David Afune and associate editor A.R. Hoffman. This program also includes engagement with all of you. So in a few moments, we'll be passing around pens and index cards, and we ask you to write down your questions, and we will have them answered in the program. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the publisher of the New York Sun, Mr. David Afune, associate editor A.R. Hoffman, and Professor Alan Dershowitz. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Jean, for that kind introduction, and thank you to all of you for being with us this evening. I know many of you are friends, members, I would say fellow travelers of the New York Sun, and have been following closely our growth and evolution, and I'm pleased to kick off by reporting to you all that we are very, very much on the march, and seeing, especially in increasing months, a great and pronounced acceleration of the work of the Sun, the readership of the Sun, the influence and the reach of the Sun's reemergence. And we know that any newspaper is as strong as the constituency that it serves, and we're grateful to all of you for coming along with us on that journey. I'm joined here by my colleague, A.R. Hoffman, associate editor of the Sun, and of course the famed legal scholar Alan Dershowitz. Just to give you a sense of the format that we had in mind for tonight, I'm going to start with some questions that focus more on Professor Dershowitz, the man, and my colleague here, Ari, will then take over and focus on some of the big substantive issues of the day and solicit the professor's opinion on those. And then at the end, we'll have an opportunity to take some questions from the audience. As always, we'll have note cards that go around and pens, so everybody will have a chance to put their ideas on paper, and we'll pose as many of them as possible as we can. So let me start with this, Professor. Running newspapers, one is in the position that they are in the receipt of a lot of invitations to all kinds of things. Events, openings, book signings, speeches, and over the years, over the last decade, your name was one that appeared with quite incredible frequency at the 92nd Street Y, at the Stryker Center, at whatever synagogue it was, or Jewish Community Center, etc. In recent years, there seems to have been a real pullback on that score.
That understates it.
So I'll start with this. What is your understanding or explanation of the evolution today of Alan Dershowitz as a public figure?
Lack of courage by Jewish leaders is what explains it. When I was first accused by a woman I never met, never heard of doing something I never did, I've been with my wife, faithful to her for it's almost 40 years now. When that first happened, I immediately got canceled by the 92nd Street Y. And the head of the Y said, essentially, we don't believe a word of this, but we don't want trouble. And then, I was the second most frequent and popular speaker at the 92nd Street Y after Elie Wiesel. And Elie Wiesel, toward the end of his life, knew about this and said he would never again speak at the Y. And then I gave a series of talks at Temple Emmanuel in New York. We did the trials of biblical characters. I defended Abraham for attempted murder. I defended David for adultery. And I defended, all these people. And we got 1,600 people. the rabbi would always introduce me and say, "I wish I had as many people for Yom Kippur." And it was very, very popular. And then one day I got a call saying the head of the board of directors, who was a thug, who had for years made his fortune of money selling bad pharmacological and other products as an advertising person, said that I didn't meet the standards of morality that he had set for the synagogue. The deputy chairman was, at the time, Jeffrey Zucker, who, of course, was fired from CNN for improper sexual conduct. And these were the people who were sitting in judgment of me. While I'm talking about that, I'll just have to tell one story or else I'll forget it. So Carol and I, we're at a dinner party on Martha's Vineyard, and seated next to me was a woman, a prominent woman, who had been to our home, I had been to her home, and she said to me, "If I knew you were invited to this dinner, I never would have come because of who you have represented." And I said to her, "You mean your Uncle Ted Kennedy?" This was Caroline Kennedy. I said, "You mean your father, for all the sexual improprieties of which he was accused?" And she said, "Well, I'm too polite to leave." But that was fairly common. So, to me, the worst of them was not the 90 Seconds to Wear manual, which was pretty bad, but Ramah's school. The Ramah's school. So the head of the Ramah school calls me and says, there's nobody better able in the United States, I think he understated it, in the world, to actually advise our seniors and juniors who are going to college how to deal with anti-Semitism in college. And with all due modesty, there is no one better in the world. I've done it for 50 years, and I am the world's leading expert on anti-Semitism in college and how to deal with it. And he said, "How much would you charge to come and spend a day with the students?" I said, "I'm going to do it for free. This is really, really important." About a week later, I got a call saying the chairman of the board, another wealthy Jewish macha, said, "No, we can't have you associating with young women, and so you're canceled." And those were just 3 examples of the new McCarthyism. I remember the old McCarthyism. I went to college in 1955, just 2 years before Senator McCarthy died. And the president at Brooklyn College was a McCarthyite named Harry Gideons. If any of you went to Brooklyn College, you'll remember him. He was notorious. He was appointed to be head of Brooklyn College because Brooklyn College was known as the Little Red Schoolhouse. And he was to change its color. And it's interesting how red has become associated now with a different color, but in any event, his job was to get rid of all leftists and communists and all of that. And there was another guy he worked with at the school who worked very hard to try to fire communists and people who had been communists. And you probably have heard of this guy's son, the man who was the professor at Brooklyn College, who was chairman of, I think he was chairman, of the Romance Language Departments, was a man named Eugene Scalia. And that was Nino's father. And so I was president of the student government, and I'm very, very anti-communist. I was very anti-communist as a kid. Stalinism for me was, the worst. Stalin was killing Jews. Always very anti-communist, but I was a civil libertarian. So I was defending Professor Slockower and others who were being fired by Scalia and by Gideons. And Gideons, as a result of that, would not write me a recommendation for law school, even though I was first in my class, and president of the student body, head of the debate team. He thought I was a fellow traveler. And so, I remember the old McCarthyism. And there is nothing, as Ecclesiastes says, there's nothing new under the sun.
Yep.
It's reversed the roles. The new McCarthyism is coming from the progressive left. The old McCarthyism came from the regressive right. And so I have a thick skin. I've defended some of the worst people that have ever worked the earth, and will continue to do so, as long as the good Lord gives me. Yeah. But it took a real toll on my family. I have a thick skin, but it took a real toll on my family. My wife was working out in a gym on Martha's Vineyard. Somebody walked in and said, "Oh, that's Alan Dershowitz's wife. I can't be in the same room with her," and walked out.
So, now, there's been a settlement. Your accuser has withdrawn.
I didn't settle anything. She just admitted that let's get it clear, she mistook me for somebody else 7 times. Having sex with me 7 times, she mistook me for somebody else. That's really insulting to my...
So I guess, since that's happened,
Yeah.
right, that she's come out and said
Yeah.
that, have you seen any change from some of the organizations?
No, not...
Why do you think that is?
Because they're locked into their views. They don't want to admit they're wrong. I wrote a letter to Josh, what's his name, the head of Temple Emmanuel. Nice guy. No guts, no courage, but a nice, decent guy. And I said to him, I wrote to him during the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of repentance, and said, maybe a little tshuva, a little repentance would be in order. I'm happy to come and speak. And maybe it would be better to have me speak free at Temple Emmanuel than to pay $25,000 to have Peter Beinart speak about why Israel should not be recognized as the nation state of the Jewish people. That may be more in keeping with the mission of Temple Emmanuel, but I got no response. No response from the 92nd Street Y. No response from Ramaz, even though there's been a lot of pressure from some people at Ramaz to re-invite me, but I have not been invited to a single venue that had canceled me. So the title for tonight, Uncanceled, isn't quite right, but it's a work in progress.
One thing that, it's certainly an idea that's been floated, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Around the same time that you were dealing with this,
Right.
you were also opining on the various legal challenges and struggles that President Trump was facing.
That's right.
And, you gave your opinions, which sometimes served the president, and I think were perceived by some, certainly his greatest detractors, as being supportive.
That's right.
Do you see that these two things have any connection, or?
Well, it's interesting. They probably do. Nobody on Martha's Vineyard, the place which I was mostly attacked, not a single person that Carolyn or I or any of my friends know, not a single person ever believed the false accusations or ever based anything on the false accusations. On the Vineyard, it was purely 100% the fact that I defended Donald Trump in front of the United States Senate. 100%. On the other hand, the Jewish groups, 100% the false accusation, because after all, there are quite a few Jews in Ramaz who probably voted for Trump, which I did not do. I voted against him twice, and in my new book, Get Trump, I say I wrote it because I demand an opportunity to vote against him a 3rd time. And I do not want District Attorney Bragg to stop me from having that opportunity, because I believe that in America you express your views on people not by indicting them, but by voting against them. So yeah, there's been the division. There are a few people who have said to friends of mine, I don't think he did it, the woman thing, but I hope he did because of what he did for Trump. So there's a little of that, but mostly it's been separated. Yeah.
So you've.
But one big difference. I'm proud of what I did in respect to Donald Trump. I would do it again. I'm very proud of it. That's my job. I follow in the footsteps, hopefully, of John Adams, who defended the people at the Boston Massacre. I'm very proud of that. Had I done what I had been accused of, I would be mortified, embarrassed, and feel horrible. So in one case, I just didn't do it. I had nothing to do with it, and I wouldn't be proud if I did. In the other, I did it. And I really did it, and I'm very proud of the fact that I did it. I'm not proud of the fact that it hurt some members of my family, but it was the right thing to do. It was also the right thing to do to defend Jeffrey Epstein and to get him the best possible deal I possibly could get. Everybody in the world thought the deal I got for Jeffrey Epstein was terrific, except Jeffrey Epstein, who fired me, refused to pay my fee, and said I was the worst lawyer on earth for making him spend 13 months in prison. So that's the gratitude you get from your clients.
Well, on that subject, and obviously as an attorney, you have a duty to represent
Right.
those that approach you and can afford your fees, of course.
No, I do half my cases pro bono. I don't turn down people based just on their inability to
Right.
pay. So I have done more pro bono cases than any lawyer in American history.
And there are many that are high profile that were not pro bono. There's obviously OJ, I think
Yeah.
Harvey Weinstein for a while,
Yeah.
Jeffrey Epstein mentioned. Are there any associations or legal representations that you regret?
Yeah, I wish I had never met Jeffrey Epstein. I wouldn't have had to go through 8 years of this turmoil about this woman who falsely accused me. She wouldn't have made up a story if I had met her. The case that gave me the most ulcers was Leona Helmsley. She was just impossible. I can only tell you one story because it's public. I can't tell you the rest of the stories. But the one that's public is she and I.
This is Leona, Queen of Maine.
Queen
Helmsley.
Yeah. She and I were sitting in her hotel having breakfast in preparation for going to court, and I ordered a cup of tea, and the waiter, who was a minority person, came over and gave me the cup of tea, and I didn't even notice, but there was some liquid in the saucer. She got furious. She took the saucer and the cup and the tea, threw it on the marble floor. It broke into 10, 15 pieces. And then she said to this young man, now get on your knees and beg me for my job. And I said, Leona, I will never, ever be seen in public with you. I will never, ever again have a personal conversation with you. I'll represent you in court, but I will not have anything to do with you. And that was one of her better moments.
Well,
She met my son, who's up there. Remember what she said? First, she didn't even say hello. She said, you can lose some weight.
Oh, no.
It's interesting to note, I should just point out for the record that Leona Helmsley's Foundation Trust, the Helmsley Trust,
Yeah.
is to date one of the biggest philanthropies in America.
And that's all
And
my
the-
doing. Let me explain why.
But I should just add to that a big part of that giving is support for Israel.
Yeah, no, of course we know that. And here's what happened. I was asked to assemble a team. And this was not a pro bono case, believe me. We called my swimming pool on Martha's Vineyard, the Leona Helmsley Memorial Swimming Pool. And so I decided to assemble the best possible team. And so I got the best lawyer I know in America in terms of legal advice, Harvey Silverglade, to work with me. And there was one element
Friend of the
case,
New York Sun, by the way.
right. And there was one part of the case that involved New York state taxation. So I got the best former student of mine who worked on taxation, a man named Sandy Frankel. And I introduced him to Leona Helmsley. And he was the only lawyer who Leona Helmsley ever got along with. And as a result, she made him the administrator of her will.
Yeah.
She had nobody to give money to. She hated her children. She had a dog. She left some money to the dog, but there's only so much that you can leave to a dog. And the rest of the money she essentially gave to Sandy Frankel to distribute. So he has done an enormous, amazing job giving money to Israeli institutions, to American institutions. The Helmsley Tower, right on First Avenue, York Avenue, she backed out of giving that $100 million that she had pledged, and when she died, Sandy gave the money. So Sandy's done a great job, but I introduced Sandy to her, and
That's a great story.
Yeah.
So back to Jeffrey Epstein for a second. Do you think he killed himself?
I think he killed himself with the help of some of the guards. I don't think he did it alone. I think he paid money, or had somebody pay money to guards to turn off the video, to get rid of the cellmate. I don't think he could have easily. Remember, he tried to commit suicide, a month earlier, 3 weeks earlier. So he should have been on suicide watch, and he was not.
You don't think he was taken out as some...
I spent too much time in prison, and visiting clients in jail. I would find it very difficult for somebody to take out somebody who is in the Manhattan Federal Detention Center. It's possible. I don't know who would have done it. Nobody would believe Jeffrey Epstein, anything he said. If there were videotapes, by the way, I hope there were videotapes of every single minute of Jeffrey Epstein's life. That would be the best proof of my complete innocence. And I have said right away, I waive all privacy rights. If you have a picture of me having sex with somebody, please put it on the internet. And it will prove it's a fake picture because it never happened. You can't have a picture of something that didn't happen, even with artificial intelligence. So, yeah, he killed himself, I think. It's possible. There's a 10, 20, who knows % chance that somebody could have gotten to him. I don't know who it would be. I mean, I know stories. I was his lawyer. So I know stories involving important people that Jeffrey Epstein has told me. But I don't think anybody would believe him. And I don't think killing him prevented people from finding physical evidence that may have existed. So I don't get the motive. Remember, among the people that the woman who accused me, this woman is royal 3 continents. She made my life miserable for 8 years. She had Prince Andrew pay 20, I don't know how many millions of dollars. Some people say 20, 12 million dollars. She's,
the exchange rate.
She's done very, very, very well. And she accused Eva Barak of having sex with her. She accused George Mitchell of having sex with her. She accused Leslie Wexner of having sex with her. She was quite a busy woman. She accused Richardson, the former ambassador to the UN, and then she said lots of other people, including another king and a president, and she doesn't remember their names.
So just to change your tack for a second,
Sure.
Over the last decades, presidents of both parties have called upon you for advice.
Right.
There were times and stories that you told me with President Obama inviting you to the Oval Office,
That's right.
calling you when you were in Israel,
That's right.
if I recall. But also, I would say uniquely, equally, President Trump at times would seek your counsel.
That's right.
On various issues.
Mostly Israel.
Do you have a relationship with Joe Biden? Has he had any interest in the Dershowitz view of anything?
So I met Joe Biden in 1980 when both of us were very friendly with Ted Kennedy. Remember, Ted Kennedy was running in the Democratic primary against Jimmy Carter. And so I was one of Ted Kennedy's surrogate speakers. In fact, I was in a car with him in Los Angeles when a tire popped and a bang, which sounded like a gunshot, went off. And I've never seen a reaction like I saw from Ted Kennedy, who obviously this immediately brought to mind his 2 brothers. And so, I was fairly close to Kennedy. I spoke when he couldn't speak. I spoke with his then wife. And Joe Biden was a very close friend of his too. So I knew him at my grandson's graduation from college. I introduced my grandson to him. I have a tape when my grandson got I happened to be in the White House with Obama on the day my grandson got into Harvard. And so I was with Joe Biden, and I said to him, my grandson just got into Harvard. And she said, give me the tape recorder. And he did a little tape of saying, hey, Lyle, great move. It's terrific you got into Harvard. Congratulations. Now be smart and go to the University of Delaware. It's a better school. So, that's typical Joe. But as the result of these cancellations, as a result of that, he has not called on me. And neither did Hillary Clinton. I spoke to Hillary Clinton in August of 2016. She came to the Vineyard. She gave a fundraiser. I knew her well. I've known her for, 30 or so years. And I went over to her and I said, Hillary, you may not win this election. I know what the polls are showing, but my wife and my daughter and I just came back from all over Europe, and there is a wave that's being caught all over Europe. Nationalism, character, populism, people looking for, different kind of a president, and I think Trump has caught that wave and you haven't. And I offered to campaign for her, particularly in southern Florida, well, where there's a very large Israel and Jewish community, and Florida, of course, was a key state. And my friend, who is a very highest ranking Democratic woman official in Florida, offered to help her too, but she was so arrogant and so convinced of her victory that she never took me up on it, never took this woman up on it, and we know the result.
So we're going to switch now, pass you over to my colleague AR here to address some far more substantial and weighty matters.
These weren't weighty. They may not be weighty to you, they were weighty to me.
The appetite.
Okay.
Welcome, and let me just take the chance to welcome everybody here myself. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and I write largely on legal matters, but also in the cultural pages as well. So it's wonderful to see you all here. Alan, let me ask you this. You represented Donald Trump in his second impeachment trial, first impeachment trial.
I refused in the second because the second one involved whether the election was valid. Whether the election was valid, and I did not want to in any way be associated with any claim that the election was invalid, so I refused to defend him on his second impeachment.
Yeah, and now that, of course, there are many legal fronts with which he's involved, how would you assess his strengths and weaknesses as a client?
Well, I don't think there are any strengths, and the weaknesses are incalculable. He can't get himself a decent lawyer because he has a reputation. He treated me, I had a deal. So just 30 seconds for the story. There's a big dispute in our family. Two of my sons here are witnesses to the dispute. We are a very religious family. Every Shabbos, we have a religious ritual. We have dim sum together in a Chinese restaurant. And we were engaged in this serious religious ritual with my granddaughter, who is now an MD PhD student. And half the family says, I said, I'm not going to represent Trump. The other half, including me, maybe it's all of them other than me, that's possible too, I said I have no current intention of representing Trump. In any event, I didn't think I was going to do it. And then my wife and I were supposed to have dinner with a client, and something happened and we couldn't do it, and so he invited us to have dinner with him a few nights later at Christmas Eve with his family at Mar-a-Lago, where he was. And so we were there sitting way in the bleachers, way, and the president walks in, people cheer. We had no connection with him at all. And then I'm told he would like to speak to me. And he said, I really need you to represent me. It's important for the American public. I said, but my wife really doesn't want me to. And I said, I tell my wife. So he said, well, bring her over. So I bring her over. You're going to correct me if I get anything wrong on this story. Oh yes, she will. And he says to her, and this I remember, he said, I know how much you love each other, and you should do what's best for you, but it's really important for the country, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then on the Uber ride home, we were living in Miami Beach. This was in Palm Beach. We talked about it, and Carolyn said, I know how much you want to do this, and I did want to do it. I wanted to do it because I strongly believe that the impeachment was unconstitutional. The Constitution says treason, bribery are the high crimes and misdemeanors, and he was impeached for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, which are not in the Constitution. I believe in the Constitution. Would you ever forgive me if I told you not to do it? And we have a little dispute about what I said, but basically I said, I really want to do it. And she said, all right. But the deal was that I wouldn't talk about him. And in my 67-minute speech, I never mentioned his name. I talked about defending the presidency, defending the Constitution, and I made a deal with Trump. I said, I'm going to make a speech. You can't be extemporaneous in front of the Senate. It wasn't for that. It was a speech, 67-minute speech. And I said, here's the deal, I'll make the speech, you will not see it before I speak, and nobody on your legal team will see it. You have to trust me. And he said yes, and he complied with that. Now, then I made my speech, and it went very well, and everybody but academics praised it. All the academics would have praised it had I been defending Hillary Clinton to make the same speech, but they didn't. So you know, I made the speech, and then the next morning he called me, and I thought, sure, he thanked me. He said, Alan, I hope you thank me for making you famous. I mean, just typical Trump. Typical Trump. I hope you thank me for making you famous. Infamous. Nobody in my family spoke to me. But,
let me ask you this.
Yeah, sure.
You know, you've written in our pages, you know, sort of, I think, witheringly and compellingly, persuasively about the thinness and sort of legal gymnastics required to assemble the case that District Attorney Bragg has. But let me ask you about the other cases the president's
Okay, but I do want to get to the Bragg case at some point.
So
yeah.
let's sort of rapid fire go through all four of
Okay,
them,
sure.
right? We have the Bragg.
They're all, I'm not selling books here tonight, but my book, Get Trump, has all four of the cases. I go through each of them in detail, the strengths and weaknesses of each of the cases.
So just for our audience, right, we have the Alvin Bragg, Stormy Daniels hush money campaign finance case. We have a criminal investigation out of Georgia that has to do with election interference and the 2020 election. And then we have the two cases that are under special counsel Jack Smith's purview. The first relating to the storage of documents at Mar-a-Lago, and the second to Trump's culpability for the events of January 6th.
Okay.
So what are the strong cases? What are the weak ones? What do you think are the cases worth bringing? What are the ones that are a waste of time?
Legally, there's one strong case, and that's the Florida case. He did possess classified material improperly. He claims that he declassified them in his mind, or maybe he said, you know, magic, I declassified them. The question on that case would be, who has the burden of proof? If the burden of proof is on the government to prove he didn't declassify, they lose. If the burden of proof is on him to prove that he did declassify, he loses. That's a plausible case, legally. Politically, it's a hard case because Biden and Pence also. And by the way, forget about Biden and Pence. I guarantee you, if they did a search of every former president's private libraries, homes, basements, they would find stuff. And there's such an easy solution. My nephew Adam's here, who's a great engineer. Maybe he'll correct me on this, but every time you stamp something classified, and you have to stamp it classified, it's so easy just to put some electronic thing in the ink that immediately could identify anything that has a stamp classified. Just run
Find your
wand
friends
over
on
it.
the iPhone or something. Find your friends on the iPhone.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so-
If you can find your friend on the iPhone, you can find classified material. In any event, that case is a hard one politically. I do think in the end he very well may get indicted, not for the possession of the classified material, but for obstruction of justice. For what happened after it was discovered that he had classified material. Now the issue is an interesting one, because if all he did was, remember that both Pence and Biden did the right thing. They immediately said, oh my God, mea culpa, fratani, you know, I'm wrong, everything was terrible, please, I'm cooperating. Trump said, screw you. Screw you is not obstruction of justice. Screw you is what people like me say when I'm representing people to prosecutors. I don't cooperate with prosecutors, and I don't obstruct justice. So there's a line between aggressively not cooperating, which we know Trump didn't do, and actual obstruction of justice, which would be hard, but not impossible for the government to prove. And the government has, of course, now subpoenaed everybody, every former lawyer, and they've established a new doctrine which will change my practice of law completely. A judge has actually ruled that if a client speaks to a lawyer and lies to the lawyer he waives the lawyer-client privilege. I've had 250 clients. 249 of them have lied to me. And the only one that didn't lie to me is one who benefited from telling the truth. But, you know, in my first meeting with a client, it's always the same. Are you kidding? I should get the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm such a wonderful person. Second meeting, all right, the Nobel Peace Prize is off the table, but I didn't do anything. Third meeting, I did some bad things, but not what I'm charged with. Fourth meeting, I did what I'm charged with, but I didn't have the intent. Fifth meeting, can we make a deal? So, you know, lawyer lying to a client, my God, there's gambling in Casablanca. I mean, it's the most absurd notion. But they're going after everybody. They're going after small lawyers, and they may get something. And so, that case. The other two cases that appear to be strong, but they're not strong, unless more evidence comes up, is Fulton County. Here is the tape report. Everybody knows what he said. He said, I need to find 11,000 votes. He didn't say I need to concoct, manufacture. He said, fine. What did he mean? I don't know what he meant. He may have meant concoct, but he didn't say that. And under the principle of lenity and how you interpret statements in the context of criminal cases, I don't think you can prosecute somebody just for saying, I want you to find. Find means the votes are there, and you have to search hard, and maybe there are enough. So I don't think that's the case. And the one in Washington, D.C., again, there may be more evidence, but right now, you have, if you listen to the January 6th committee, what the president, he was the president at the time, said on January 6th was, if you listen to the January 6th committee, I want you all to go to the Capitol. I want you to sit on the desk of the Speaker of the House. I want you to break the windows. And if you have to kill some people, you can kill them. If you listen to the January 6th committee, that's what happened. What happened is they got the tape from the January 6th committee. They had his speech. And they took out the words, I want you to go to the Capitol and demonstrate peacefully and patriotically. If a lawyer ever did that, they'd be disbarred. You cannot present part of a speech and then eliminate the two crucial words that bring the case within the First Amendment. You could argue, you can say he said peacefully and patriotically, but he didn't mean it. You can say he said peacefully and patriotically, but the rest of the speech didn't suggest it. You can do all of those things. You cannot doctor the tape. And that's what the January 6th committee did.
Of course, at trial, the standard of proof would be much higher. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
judges. Okay, thanks for that rundown. Let me ask you a question.
Oh, no, we haven't done the most important case yet. We haven't done Bragg.
Right.
So I got to tell you, the Bragg case, I've been doing this 60 years. I have never seen a weaker indictment. And a lot of people say, well, there was a misdemeanor, but it really wasn't a felony, because to make the felony out of a misdemeanor, you have to show that the misdemeanor was committed to cover up a felony. There was no misdemeanor. Let me explain why. Here's the prosecution's theory, Bragg's theory. His theory is when you sign a non-disclosure agreement and when you pay hush money, which people have done in America since Alexander Hamilton paid hush money to the woman with whom he was having an adulterous affair.
Anyone who knows the song can jump in.
Right. I actually own a copy of the original essay that Hamilton wrote in defense of what he had done. There has never been a case in the history of the world where a person has paid hush money and then immediately reported on his corporate public forms, oh, by the way, the reason I spent $130,000 was to pay hush money to prevent the public, to my wife, to prevent the voters, to prevent my business associates from learning about it. So I paid $130,000 knowing I'd have to immediately disclose why I paid $130,000. That has never happened in history. And I've challenged Bragg, find me a single case where anybody has ever been indicted for failing to disclose on public corporate forms that they paid hush money. It has never happened, it never will happen, yet that's the theory. And then to turn it into a felony, you have to say he had one reason for putting that form down and saying it was legal expenses. One reason, and that is to make an illegal campaign contribution. It couldn't have been to protect his wife, family, couldn't have been to protect his business. It couldn't have been because, by the way, when you pay hush money and you're in a business, maybe it is a legal expense. And then they have another theory. This is an even more stretched theory. They say, and this is in the first, there's nothing in the indictment about it. It's in the first line of the statement of facts. The reason that he said it was a legal expense was that 2 years later, when he filed his income tax, which he never pays, when he filed his income tax, maybe, conceivably, he might have taken that as a legal expense. So the cover-up was to enable him to cheat on his taxes. First of all, the amount of money that would be involved, it's only New York taxes that we're talking about, because state government doesn't have any jurisdiction over federal taxes, would be around $9,000, which is not a lot of money for Donald Trump. More than he usually pays in taxes, but not a lot of money. And the idea that that was in his mind, he's trying to prevent the world from learning that he's had this adulterous affair with a former porn star, and he's thinking about his taxes 2 years from that. It's just preposterous, and it's irresponsible. And then to count on Michael Cohen as your witness, I mean, you know, prosecutors can make witnesses who don't want to sing. Not only can prosecutors make witnesses sing, they can make them compose. They can make them write lyrics. They can make them say things that aren't necessarily true. And the idea that Bragg can stand in front of a jury and say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, see this witness I'm putting up the stand? I'm vouching for his credibility. I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that I believe he's telling the truth. And I do not believe that an ethical lawyer could do that.
Great. Thank you for that rundown. Let me.
We're just going to be handing out cards now for anyone who has a question. Just write down your question and we'll get through as many of them as we can.
Great.